they don't sit down thinking, I'm going to take a trade today, but they sit down and they think, is there a trade today? Is there something that looks so good I have to take it?
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast. Walter here and Darren's on the line. And today we're going to talk about gambling. Darren, what does that mean to you?
Is trading gambling? For me, it certainly is 100% gambling. You know, if you look at the dictionary of the definition of gambling, it's, risking money on an event with an uncertain outcome. And I believe that, that's what we're doing when we're trading. And I also think that it's probably a good idea to have a mindset that it is gambling as well, because as soon as you start believing that you've got some way of beating the market, then you're taking yourself into a mindset that you can't lose and that, your system will always work out like it has in the past. And that's when you can really get into trouble and start doing things like over trading, because you're so convinced that you're going to make it back on this next trade, which is also a great setup to, ones before that lost, that you kind of, lose sight of your risk management. So for me, trading is gambling. And for me, it's a good idea to think of it as gambling as well.
Well, I think you bring up some really good points, such as if you're so certain that it's not gambling, in other words, there's a certain outcome, then you would be foolish not to take more opportunities, right? In other words, overtrade, which, as we both know, is a huge problem for traders out there. But I'm going to come down on the other side of the fence here, and I'm going to say that there are a lot of things about trading that are similar to gambling. But when you think about gambling, the casinos also are in the game of gambling, but you rarely see a casino go belly up. I mean, they tend to stand around for a long time and make lots of money, and they're in the gambling business, of course, but they're on the side where they've got odds that they can rely on, and generally over the long haul they know they're going to be making money, and historically they have. That's one thing I would say. I would agree with the uncertain outcome, right? Because if you stick with the strict definition of the dictionary, then yes, trading is gambling. Because we as traders get paid to do what? To take on risk. So other people out there have their money and they want to use their money on other things. They don't want to spend it on risk because it's too risky, or it's too uncertain, or they don't know what's going to happen. So they don't do that. And traders are the ones that put their arms up and say, I'll do it. I'll put my risk money up here and I'm willing to go ahead, and whatever the consequences may be, I'll have to live with them. And I hope that more often than not, or maybe not more often than not, but the end result of all these times when I risk money will be that I actually come out ahead in the end, which is just exactly what a professional gambler does, right? So I guess I would have to agree that the strict definition of the dictionary would identify what we do as traders gambling. However, I think that in everyday speak, when we say gambling, that has a negative connotation as that's gambling, or she gambles, or he, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of considered reckless, isn't it?
Yeah. To gamble with your money.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you. It is an uncertain outcome. But here's the thing that always interests me when people, and this is difficult, like if you have a partner who frowns upon your trading because they say it's gambling, then you've got a lot of pressure to do well, to prove to your wife or your husband or whoever, your boyfriend or your girlfriend, that this is something that is viable as a choice. Maybe not even your primary job, but it's something that you do on the side or whatever, outside of your job. So I guess you have to think, if trading were really gambling and we're in the same category as betting on horses and dogs and playing the one-armed bandit and the pokey machines, as we call them in Australia here, then why aren't the banks doing it? Right? If you're listening to this and you're near a city, you can go into that city and you can look at the big tall buildings in the middle of the city. Those are all the banks, right? We know that. Every city across the world, you go downtown, you look up, and you'll see bank buildings, the big nice ones. But those companies, those banks, they don't bet on horses, right? We know that they don't bet on horses because they don't report that they don't bet on horses to their shareholders. But they do almost universally make money in the currency markets. Now, they don't do exactly what you or I do, but they are in the same game of risking capital to make capital over the long haul. So that's one thing that I think you can point to and say, well, there must be something slightly different about this. Because even if we use the same probabilities, the same statistics that gamblers and professional gamblers use when we're looking at our odds and trying to work out whether or not we think this is going to, this is going to make money over the long haul. It's the same thing that the casinos do, but it's a little bit different to betting on horses or dogs or whatever. So that's how I look at it. I don't know if that's the correct way, and maybe I'm stuck into this thinking that I can control, the overall outcome, or I know what the overall outcome is going to be over the long haul. But that's kind of the way that I see it. So I guess my question for you would be, Darren, what are some of the elements of trading that are more or less like traditionally think of as gambling? Or would you just say across the board, trading is the same as betting on horses or whatever?
I think with trading, it's just the perception of trading, because it's so, like you say, because it's, associated with banks and guys in Wall Street in suits, with good educations. And I think that's all just kind of, makes it appear less reckless, really. But I'm pretty sure that with how, retail trading spreading now, won't be long before we see, special places set up for addiction to trading, like we have for slot machines and betting on the horses, etc. I think really the main difference is, if you look at professional gamblers, whether it be poker or betting on horses, their approach to the gambling is much more considered. And I think with trading, people, rather than just kind of set up an account and bet like you could with the horses, okay, like you just walk in the bookies, pick a name. So I think people perhaps look into it a little bit more and study what's required and do a bit of education with trading. And I think that kind of makes it slightly less reckless. But beneath it all, to me, it's essentially the same. And I have sort of studied some really good professional gamblers who bet on horses. When you really break it down, and the sort of techniques and how they go about their trading, how they look at their risk and their rewards, really, it's very, very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. If you I've heard some professionals like on podcasts talk about betting on different sports games and things like that, and they're always talking kind of in terms of risk to reward, like the market has really beat down this bet, so it's a good risk to reward, so I'm going to take it, and that sort of thing. It's not that they're betting on who they think is going to win. It's that they're taking these opportunities as they present themselves, because the market seems to have discounted the likelihood that one of the teams are going to win or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like they're waiting for the market, and that's why they'll say things like wait for the line to come down. I don't really listen to these a lot, but I have heard them a few times, and it's fascinating because they're really sort of playing the market on the bet. They're not really playing the bet, they're playing the market on the bet. And what I mean by that is, say at the beginning of the week, your favorite team is a 3-point favorite. So they'll wait until your team, the market pushes that down, and now they're only a 2-point favorite, and then they'll take the bet, right? Yeah, so they do things like that, which I find fascinating. And I guess in a way, it's not really much different from if I see a big shadow or an engulfing candle in the market. To me, that's the market showing its hand. Now, I know it's not always going to work out, and it's not always going to be the case that ends up being a profitable trade. But I believe that the market is kind of doing something funny, and that gives me an opportunity to get in. And I think the professional gamblers see it the same way, where they're just waiting for the market to get to a point where they say, okay, there's something going on here, and it's a good place to jump in. I think the best traders I've ever worked with, they have this same mindset where they don't sit down thinking, I'm going to take a trade today, but they sit down and they think, is there a trade today? Is there something that looks so good I have to take it? Rather than, okay, I'm home from work, it's 7 p.m., I'm going to sit down and bang out some trades. They don't approach it like that. They think that they are patient, and they think that they are pouncing on the market when something has kind of set up so that they can do that. So it's interesting. I suppose I did one time. I was in Las Vegas and met up with a friend of mine, and she knew a bunch of professional gamblers. Now I didn't really know who these guys were, but apparently they're really famous. So it was interesting to spend time with them. They were all poker players. And she was explaining to me that people say that these professional poker players are just lucky or whatever, but why do they keep winning then? Why is it that they keep? Is it just that they're the story where you have 1,000 monkeys all banging on a typewriter and one of them ends up with Shakespeare, right? It just by dumb luck. Is that really what it is? That these guys are just very, very lucky? Or is there something going on here where they understand the odds and how the odds are shifting as the deck is changing, and are they reading people's emotions and, all those things that go into poker? So I don't know. I mean, I guess my next question would be, let's say that we agree that all of the smartest graduates coming out of university, they all want to go into finance because that's the industry that pays off the best, and it is gambling, right? So if it is gambling, right? If trading is gambling, then is there anything that we can do other than just be lucky to get good at it? What can you possibly do? In other words, is there a way that you can make this gambling work for you over the long haul? Maybe not over the next trade or the next 10 trades, but over the next 1,000 or 10,000 trades. Is there something that you can do to make this work for you? For example, in blackjack, you can count cards, right? If you're playing blackjack against the dealer, you can count cards, and that's going to give you an advantage. If you can count the cards, you know how many tens are in there and all that. That will give you an advantage. In fact, casinos will kick you out if they know that you're doing that, right? But is trading the same?
Yeah, they've done a lot to try and cut that out, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly. Is trading the same way? Is there, like, for example, is there one thing that you can do? You say, okay, I raise my hand, I agree, it's gambling. I don't know what to do, though. What do I do to make it work? So what do you say to that?
That's really difficult to sum up. I think really, if we sort of go back to the podcast we did the other week, I think having a breadth of knowledge is going to help. And I know a lot of people kind of say to specialize in one thing, and I think eventually you kind of get to that point. But I do think, I mean, there's a lot of negatives about, when you start out trading, trying lots of different strategies and chopping around. But I actually think that kind of helps in the long run. And you can kind of see that, everything really is the same, really, just from, a different... there'd be like a poker player who's, really good at bluffing and winning on when he hasn't got good hands. And there'd be other poker players who are really patient and wait for really good hands before, betting strongly. And I think the same goes on in trading. So really it's kind of having, really wide knowledge of trading and strategies, and through personal experience, not just through reading. Reading can only give you so much. I think really, they say the 10,000 hours in front of the chart, practice makes perfect. Well, that's heavily debated now, whether practice makes perfect if you focus too narrowly. So I think, practice, give yourself time, but also don't be afraid to try new things and look down different avenues and see what that tells you about what you were doing. And then, you may eventually go back to your original strategy. But I think, having that open mind view of it can really help.
Yeah, interesting. I like these points. So one thing that reminds me of looking at different strategies as a trader and sort of when you're first getting your feet wet is the idea when you go to university, they have a core set of courses in most colleges where you have to take certain, you have to have a breadth of experience. To get your degree, your 4-year degree from the uni, they expect you to do certain things and take certain courses and have sort of a background, of things to learn. And I think the same thing kind of happens for many traders where they will look at different strategies, some of them trend following, some of them reversion to the mean, some of them breakout, swing trading. They'll look at different types of things and they'll see how others approach those, and then they'll kind of gravitate to something that makes sense to them. So, for example, like I did a whole lot of schooling in psychology, but really, if you break it down, psychology isn't that different from biology. You have the same sort of things going on. You have certain biologists are going to have their own little pet theories about this and that or whatever, And then there could be other biologists who don't agree and are doing experiments to try and show that those people are wrong, and so forth. And it's the same thing in physics or whatever. You get the same sort of thing going on where people get really, really focused on a certain idea or problem, and they spend their whole lives working on it. What will typically happen is somebody will come in from left field from a totally different discipline and totally blow the whole thing up because they're coming at it from a completely different angle. And that often happens in things like, psychology or physics or whatever. You'll get someone who comes in with a totally different approach. And that's kind of why I think having a lot of background in trading and different systems can help you. One, you're exposed to different ideas and you see how different traders approach it. But two, you also will eventually hit the jackpot because you'll see something that resonates with your beliefs about the market. Right? Because if you don't believe that the market gets really quiet and constricted and then just breaks out and goes crazy, then you're probably never going to want to trade a breakout system. That won't make sense to you, right? So I agree. I think you nailed it on that one. That it's good to have this breadth of experience with trading systems. That certainly makes sense.
Yeah. With the gambling thing, be open-minded about it. We can learn a lot as traders by, thinking about who's successful gambling. Most people, when they gamble, they lose their money. And most people, when they trade, lose their money as well. So there's parallels going on there. And if you perhaps consider why people lose money when they're gambling, then, it'll probably give you some good hints why you're probably not winning when you're trading as well. And, to me, they're both different, sections of the same endeavour, really. For me personally, I find it much more comforting to think of it as gambling than I ever did when I thought it was kind of some sort of academic thing that I needed to learn and master. And I think that's helped me to sort of adopt that mindset.
Right. There's another thing I just wanted to ask you, because I think you bring up a really good point about the 10,000 hours thing, right? So we know that at a certain stage, the brain can get to a point where you become an expert or whatever with so many exposures to the event, to the thing that you're doing, playing the flute, trading the euro, whatever it is. So my question is, let's say that, because I see where your angle is, right? You're saying like, well, does it really make perfect? Does practice really make perfect? But what if it didn't? What if practice didn't make perfect? And I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that, but what if it just gave us confidence because we've seen so many charts and sort of pulled down the anxiety level for the trader? So let's say that the fact that the trader has taken 10,000 trades on the euro doesn't really make him any better a trader, but just because he's done this, he now feels a certain level of confidence that he didn't have before in his trading. And so then when he goes to the live markets and starts trading live, he approaches it differently. There's value in that, right?
Yeah, I think definitely you will gain something from doing anything repeatedly. Definitely. I think the danger is to become too fixed in your mindset that, okay, I'm just going to trade this setup on the euro, and I'm just going to keep doing it until I make it work. And you kind of, because you've narrowed your focus, then you're quite likely to miss out some sort of glaring obvious things that are suggesting that maybe you should vary your system. So there's like other lessons you could be learning. And because you're so sort of narrowing your focus, you might miss out on those. So certainly you need time, but I think you shouldn't be too narrow in your focus, really.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I've appreciated this one, Darren. I like these discussions when we have, where we kind of break it down and get into the nitty-gritty of just one idea, which is something that everyone's had to consider is trading gambling. I hope it's been good for you, the listener, and I appreciate your time, Darren.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Walter. Cheerio.
See you next time.